Perfect. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Pat and Mike Show. Today we have a guest, Jeremiah Campbell, who to me is essentially my mental health coach. I've never told him that, but he pretty much is. If I need some inspiration when it comes to just positive outlook, he's our guy. If we're gonna talk about anything that we were talking about off camera, it's gonna be great content for everyone to just kind of hear his story. And I think it'll be good as we transition out of stay-at-home order, which was just extended, to kind of some normal life and just keeping a positive attitude as we make that transition. Jeremiah, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you
Hey, Mike, before we launch into Jeremiah, you mind saying kind of who we are and
Mike Rutkowski from the Rutkowski Law Firm, same with Pat Carrier down there. We essentially right now are offering, a couple of things we got going on is the 50% off all estate planning services, also free healthcare and financial powers of attorney to all frontline responders as a thank you. Good reminder, Pat. Appreciate it. Yep. Jeremiah.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always an honor and a privilege to share basically my experience with life. I'm 33 years old, Southeast Michigan. I've lived many different lifestyles. I'm an entrepreneur now. I own and operate a masonry business. I thought I was in the business of fixing people's brick. Then I found out by hiring a coach and a mentor that I'm actually in the self-development business, and I build humans by changing their perspectives, outlooks in their lives, and it's financed by my masonry company. So we build success. We're looking to just create an opportunity for people to build a life that they never thought they were capable or able to build based upon changing the way that they think by changing their stories.
So let's rewind a little bit. And how long have you had the company? Kind of give us the growth pattern of that too. Because I've heard your story and I love your story. And I want to give the listeners that. It wasn't all that long ago where it's almost like a coming from nothing to incredibly successful. And I know you're super humble, so you're not going to get into much of that. But gotta give us the story of how this all came to be.
So I was very blue collar, like my family, like my whole life was you trade time for money, and there's a lot of security in that. So as humans, I now in hindsight realize that all growth happens when you become uncomfortable, and it doesn't feel comfortable to be uncomfortable. So books that I've read and things that I've done just continue to beat into my head that the way my life is going to be a direct reflection of how comfortable I get with being uncomfortable. So if I want the same results repeated over and over again and expecting different results and doing different things, my life's never going to actually change. So when I was 18 years old, I was spraying cars, the auto industry. So here in Detroit, everybody's affected by the auto industry in one way or another. And I watched my parents get laid off over and over and over again. And I started doing, getting with drugs and alcohol, and I spun out of control between the age of 16 and 19, where I ended up having to go to inpatient rehab centers 5 different times. And I really started to understand the depths of the disease of addiction and really understanding how everything in my body didn't want to use drugs or alcohol, but I no longer had a choice. So I started just asking myself different questions. So after I stopped the drugs and alcohol with 12-step programs, I was able to then start looking at my life and start designing the life that I wanted to live. And I was at a meeting one time, a 12-step meeting, and this guy was like, "Hey, dude, why don't you come to work with me?" And I always tell the story because I've come quite far from this, but he had store-bought cigarettes in a Red Bull, and I had a $1 Rip It, and I was rolling my own cigarettes. And that was about 12 years ago. I quit smoking, June 20th, 12 years ago. So I was right in that time frame when about 13 years ago I started on this road to, I guess, what you would call success.
Yeah. So at what point in time were you like, I can do this? Maybe, I can transition from working for someone and now for yourself and building your plan?
It's a great question, Mike. The thing is I don't know if it ever goes away. I still doubt myself. It's just I don't listen to it. It's still there. I can still hear it. It'll say the other foot's going to drop. You're never going to be prepared enough. You never have enough saved. They're going to tell you I told you so. And I call those ants, automatic negative thoughts that just come in your head. I space the gap out, and I start to ask myself, what makes this true? Like, I still think, like, in my mind, doesn't matter. There was 40 people at my safety meeting this morning, of course, 6 feet apart, socially distanced. And being able to lead such a wonderful thing, and my success is directly by how successful I can build builders, and I can build leaders. And when they can lead crews, and they can lead their families, and they can, so I went on and on about a story this morning about, we do surveys when we finish a project, and it has nothing to do with the customer. It has to do with the subconscious mind of my crew leaders, that then they know they have to walk up to a project and get them to go through the survey, which they know in their head, which makes them do a better job. So I'm only going to be as successful as my weakest link. So these are all things, like, I become a coach and a podcaster and all these things after I just had to learn it the hard way. So to answer your question of how was I able to once say, like, can I make it on my own? I still question that. I just don't listen to it anymore. It's white noise. And I'm like, yeah, but what makes that true? And then I just continue to push forward anyways. And I get uncomfortable and I get anxiety, and I say, well, I know what that feels like. Let's keep going that way.
That's amazing. So tell us how you used all those kind of thought processes as we all, like, initially got hit by everything changing with COVID-19, right? What were you thinking in your personal life, in your business life? Like, what were the things that kind of got you through just keeping positive? Because I know I had a meltdown for at least a day where I was like, oh man, like, I don't know what we're going to do. I'm now a teacher. I work from home, like, so many things in my life that were comfortable and now uncomfortable.
So I did too. I freaked out we postponed payments and got for 24 to 36 hours. We sat around in my office, my leadership team and myself. We sat around and waited. And then she finally made the announcement we knew she was going to make. And it was like 36 hours. She shut it down on Monday. I was selling my house that Tuesday, and I thought I was gonna lose that deal. And then I had to finish the house that I moved into Saturday. Then we couldn't get any materials, and then, like, lines of credit dried. Like, it was chaos, and it was. And I fell victim to the thought process that allowed me to go down that. And so the way the universe repels is, I said, stop paying all bills, stop payment on all bills. Let's ask for terms and let's do all this. And that was advice from people. So what I end up doing as a human is just saying, well, I start listening to people around me, and the more important, especially parents, like my dad and my mom, like, they give me advice, and it's very, very valuable to me. Like, when my mother gives me parenting advice, I take it like it's gold, and I never look at it, and I never look at it subjectively and say, well, wait a minute, what gives her the authority? Because she's always been the authority to me. So I have to start asking myself where that comes from. So I have older friends that went through the crash of 08, 09, and they're like, stop paying all your bills. And I'm like, no record showed that this was going to happen. So I did it. And then I got on the phone with my coach. I've had a coach for like the last 5 years that I pay a lot of money for coaching. And I got on the phone, and he's like, what is wrong with you, Jeremiah? He's like, you have two state of beings. He's like, you're either in survival or you're in thrive. Survive or thrive. You can't pick both. You can't slow down. So you're either going to need to push through this, or you're going to let this wreck you. And I know how you operate. So then I switched it. I got back to the basics. I started going through my mantras. I said, you're better and better every day in every way. That's one of Zig Ziglar's, one of the OGs in the personal development space. I'm better and better in every day in every way. When I don't want to wake up and I'm feeling depressed, I say, I can't, most will. Or most won't, I will. Most won't, I will. And I keep repeating that until I start to get that repetition. There's a little slice when you first wake up, and right before you're about to fall asleep, you're in theta brainwave, and when you're in that, that's when you penetrate the subconscious mind. So 95% of your thoughts are repeated from the day before, and you don't have any control over them because they're on autopilot to keep you alive. So I say, how can I reprogram that? I have to start changing the stories. What changes the stories is, first thing, shut off the news, shut off the radios. Like, it's all doom and gloom, because that's what sells. Because it creates the chemical emotions in your brain that release the dopamines and rushes into your body. And that's what gets people excited and gets them into fight or flight. Then they can't make rational decisions, like calling the Rutkowski law firm to get their estate planning done, because they're so freaked out and afraid that if they spend the money, they might not be able to pay their mortgage payment. But they don't understand, if they spend the money 50% off, and then they're able to put that and check that off, the emotional and mental and spiritual freedom that comes from that is worth any price that you'd ever pay.
Amen to that. It's a good thing we're recording this, because I'm going to have to watch that all over again.
Yeah. I was gonna say that was coming kind of rapid fire right there. Trying to note it down, and I was like, oh no, this is recorded. I can get back into this later. But that's when you were saying about getting these things done. Almost everyone who works with us at some point says, I have been meaning to get this done for a year, a decade,
Yep.
forever. At some point, I wanted to get this done because they know they need to. They know they're supposed to, but people don't because in our industry, there's a couple things that go along with it that are a little bit different than yours. One is, the kind of the concrete reality of it. Concrete, not intended to be a pun, but like you're actually like you are building something, and when it's done, people can see, is the wall straight? Is it keeping the cold out? Is it working? Is it doing the things that it's supposed to do? On our side of things, there's a whole lot more. Like, I know I'm supposed to do this, but by the time it comes into effect, either you passed away, you're not competent, there's something like that, and so there is this element of faith in terms of having this thing secured. Like, hey, they explained it to me, and I think this should work, but by the time I need it to, I likely won't be there, to administer it. And so there's just that I don't know, that peace of mind element that comes along with it, and that's a big part of what we do, is making sure that people have that.
Yeah, Pat, just to add to what you're saying, I can't tell you how many times I've heard, now I can sleep at night.
Yeah.
And also sometimes people come in and they're like, I haven't slept for days, just being nervous about signing that. And we get so used to it, but it's truly why we all love doing what we do, because I mean, just the stress, the burden it takes off people's shoulders. It's just an incredible feeling to get a hug after doing something, that seems so straightforward for us.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of the most selfish things somebody could ever do is not have a will and trust. I have so many of my friends and family that have, because I'm in the recovery community, right? And people die. That's what drug addicts do and alcoholics do when they drink or drug, when they identify as that, and all the time. And nobody ever has those. And I'm like, we'll spend money on cars and clothes and shoes and everything else. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have a will and trust? Like, I don't understand. Like, literally, like, I have one. You know what I mean? And you got to go back over and because my life changes so fast. Addresses, properties, all the things that change. And it's like,
why does that not surprise me?
If I was to die today, a car drives through here, kills me right now. Like, the idea of my wife and my kids love me dearly. The mourning process that they would have to go through, like, everything needs to be done. Like, it has like everything in there. Like, if I'm incapacitated and Mallory, my wife, can't make the decisions, who's going to make the decisions for me? Who gets the kids? Who gets the life insurance? Who gets everything? It's all planned out. Like, I just don't. I mean, I get it. We whatever we make a priority gets done, and people don't make that a priority because they don't see it's going to happen to them. But that's like, there's two things in life that are guaranteed: taxes and death. Right.
Right. Amen to that. For sure.
Well, and this is one of those where, either there has to be a triggering event in people's lives. Is my opinion, is my experience. And being in the addict recovery community like you are, you've seen a whole lot of people who have had those kind of world shaking moments. All of us now going through this COVID crisis, if you don't know someone personally, at least you're much more aware of these things going on around you. But it's shocking to me the number of people who will not do anything for decades, and then they're like, "Well, I'm flying to Australia, so I'm going to get this put into place." And it's like, you drove around Detroit for 20 years worth of winters, and somehow you think that flying Qantas Airlines is more dangerous than that? It's like, no, that's not what actually happens. It's the mundane stuff, It is a car accident. It's old age. It's the things that will happen, to all of us at some point. And then whether or not you're going to kind of accept that, face it, and go forward. I mean, a lot of what you're talking about when it comes to mindset is kind of accepting how the world is and then addressing that, as opposed to sticking your head in the sand and ignoring that these things are going to happen. It's not what we do. We enjoy it, but it's not, what do I want to say? It's not the most fun, exciting thing in the world to talk about, death and dementia, but it's real. I mean, it's going to happen, and pretending that it won't doesn't fix the situation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the awareness of it. I mean, so you don't see the world as it is, you see it as you are. So
Hmm.
like what everybody's perception is, like reality is only what you think it is. And like when people think that, just because like I learned this as a youngster, like watching people lie, and I became a good liar as well. And like when you watch people lie, if they tell themselves a few times, it actually becomes reality to them, and their lie then becomes their truth. So, and you can't convince them otherwise. So I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute here. Like, so your personality is created by your own personal reality, which is created by your attitude, your actions, and your beliefs, what you deem as real and essential in your life. So I'm like, okay, what do I have to be aware of? Because I mean, 97% of the world doesn't even know what personal development is. And like, that's where I live all of my life, because I have to then become aware of where I am. Take inventory of where I am. In 12 steps, they call it the fourth step, where you're like taking personal inventory, right? Like when you when your business is failing, you need to figure out where you are and where you stand in your own personal life, in your family, in your relationships, all the different mental mindset buckets that you may or may not have. Like, where do you line up in these? And then you start prioritizing it. So then what can be managed can be improved. So if you start managing it and saying, well, this is the way I feel, like I'm dealing with right now these contractors that aren't doing exactly what I expect them to do, and I'm holding them to these standards, and I'm like, they're sleeping well at night. I'm losing sleep. So I'm getting a resentment because I'm putting an expectation on what they're supposed to give me, verbalizing it like all the self-development gurus tell you to do. Make it very clear, draw a line, and I'm still losing sleep. And I'm starting to dig deeper. What are these emotional feelings that are going on? And it's victimization. So like I'm fine unless it's out of my control, which then makes me a control freak, which then makes me codependent. So I'm like, so it's a whirlwind to go down, but most people don't care enough or are unaware enough to say what is important in their lives, and then I start writing it down and journaling it, and looking at my life and saying, where do I want to go? How can I take personal responsibility of my life right now? Because if I don't have it in my life, it's because I don't have the stories or beliefs to make that practical in my life. So everything falls back to what, like I told you earlier, with what our parents or whoever raised us taught us. And they were the most influential as our minds were getting created. So I just know certain things are fact, and that's just wisdom, and it was passed on. Like somebody told me one day, they're like, you know what wisdom is? And I'm like, they're like, it's a memory without an emotion attached to it. And I'm like, holy shit, you're right. Like, that's exactly what it is. It's something that you know is 100% true. Like, you know, the stove's hot. You don't have emotion attached to it. It's just, you know it. So I'm like, okay, what is wisdom in my head? What do I know? And then I start breaking down these different, these different exercises that my wife and I have created about, what is it going to look like? What's your life going to look like? Who told you that that was true? And is that actually true? And then you got to start going through these different cycles of like, it's not true. Okay, so what makes it true that it's not important to have an estate plan? Well, somebody's grandfather could have not had one, and the money went to the mistress, and then so somebody along the way put a good emotion to that. And if I see a Corvette ripped down the street, I'm a Corvette guy. I love Corvettes. I'll say, wow, that is awesome. It brings me joy. However, Pat, if somebody in your family died in a Corvette, it's the same Corvette, but we're going to have different emotions attached to it based upon the meaning we place on it. So when I can just tell my story differently and remember it differently, I can choose to remember my childhood. I can choose to remember, and then it goes into like, oh my God, what are we going here? So life happens for me and not to me. Now I'm not the victim. When I'm the victim, then I have no time to create. I have no time for my life to get good. I have no time to actually, because my body's in survival and I can't create. And I'm just energy flowing through this anyways.
Gotcha. It would be I think it would be helpful for me at least. You know, you've talked a little bit about some of those mantras, some of those routines. What either do you do personally, or do you think would be helpful to folks who, I know a lot of us have lost a lot of our daily routines. You know, social routines, fitness routines. There are things that we all do. I mean, the vast majority, humans are creatures of habit, and a lot of us have had that really thrown out of whack. And there was a long time there where it was like, oh, I'll get through one more day, one more week, one more what hour, whatever. and then then it'll go back. But it's not going to, and it's not going to for quite some time. I mean, even you lift the stay at home, you lift the lockdown orders. It's not going back to the way it was, until at the very least we get a vaccine or something like that. So what would you recommend, or what are you practicing in your own life that you would see as useful or helpful to folks,
Yeah.
specifically or generally?
Yeah, no. So specifically, what I do is, I fall out of my out of my routines. I've gained like 10 or 15 pounds, just because I want to. I mean, so there's no excuse. Like I train at home. I have a gym at my house, and like I'm able and capable to do stuff. I'm an emotional eater, so like that's my vice. I don't drink or smoke. I like food. And then I try to train, but like when I don't want to do something, I'm then breaking the promise to myself. So like I make declarations to myself, and I'll say things like, I am not going to eat candy today, and I'll say those out loud. I am not going to eat candy today. So if I've ate candy for the last 20 days, my even though I say it, my mind's gonna be like, haha, you are going to eat candy today because you did it the last 20 days. But it's making those small promises to yourself. And so it's like, hey, eat 2 pieces of candy today. So it's doing those things. It's getting back to those routines, but you're only going to fall back. Like I did a lot of gun training, right? And you never rise to the occasion. You always fall to your training. And it's a repetitive thing. So it's like, if I'm able and capable to work out and train for an hour a day, or go through one of Mike's crazy workouts and jumping and doing CrossFit in his garage, and like, I could get there, but I'm not there. So like, I'll ask myself, like, for me personally, it all boils down to my vision. So I have to have a vision so big that it scares me, but it gets me excited enough to get out of bed. So some people's goals aren't as big as mine, or maybe they're larger. Maybe it's just they want to spend more quality time, or they want to stop emotionally reacting to their children, because that's a big one right now, is yelling at my kids, right? Like I don't want to be that dad. And you know what? It makes me nervous and upset when my windows are open and I scream at my children, my neighbors hear me. You know what I mean? And then I'm like, now they're judging me. Now I'm getting social influence, and now I'm getting all these things. So like getting back on track. If you're on track, you know what to do. But it's making the small promises. It's writing, one day. It's getting to be in a commitment to enjoy yourself and to figure out who you really are. Because like I ask people all the time, I'll say, how did you get to where you are? And I'm like, I had to figure out where I wanted to go. I got to figure out who I am. And I'm like, well, like a lot of people suffer from procrastination. I'm actually the opposite of that. I physically, it's like the OCD manic in me, where I can't let things become undone. And it gets me in a lot of trouble. Like I can't do it. Yesterday I was washing my truck, and I remember the last 5 Memorial Days, I was washing my truck. That's what I do. And my kid was inside watching TV. And I'm always like, when I finish this, then I'll go in there. What I make an avatar in my head, and I say, the dad that I want to be and the person that I want my son to remember me as, it doesn't matter about a nice truck. It doesn't matter how clean the truck is. It matters that I sat inside there and ate a bowl of popcorn on the floor as we watched Goosebumps. That's what he's going to remember. So then I had to stop, become aware, because I think my truck's got to be clean, because once that's clean, then I'll feel better, and then I'll do that. And I'm prolonging the pleasure for the pain. And I'm like, you know what? All that matters is going to be spend time with that kid. So it's just doing those, but it's all an awareness exercise and identifying what makes us feel good. You want a better life? You want to be happier? Do things that make you happy. And okay, what makes you happy? For me, it's this. It's these conversations. It's these connections that you have. It's the one person that might message me and say, hey, what you said resonated with me, and I was thinking about this, and now I'm not thinking about it that way. I don't care if it's short-lived. It could be a 1-minute thing, because here's the thing about us humans. We'll hear something. I'm like, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And then I'm like, what did they say? And you completely forget it. But it leaves an impression on your brain. And what I do is I want to have more of them synapses connections in my brain to be able to function and realize that my life is designed the way I'm allowing it to flow. So I want to be a person that's remembered and joyful. And I want to bring value to people rather than just take it away.
That was deep. I love it.
Thanks,
no, for sure. I mean, and that to my mind, and I know you do a whole lot more kind of intentionality with this, but that is, to my mind, the heart of mindfulness, is to take those minutes and say, why am I doing the thing that I'm doing? It's so easy to just kind of autopilot through, you know, a morning or a day or a week. I mean, people will autopilot through decades of their lives, you know, but to kind of continuously take that step back and say, why am I doing what I'm doing? What is the ultimate purpose here? Is it something that brings me joy? Is it something that I have to do or else the world will fall apart? Because there are those things too, you know, that you don't, maybe they're not, in the actual act of it is not the most thrilling thing in the world, but you know that you have to do it, and that kind of keeps life chugging along, and in that it is positive and joyful. But to think about those things as opposed to, you know, getting down on it. I was doing a lot of home improvement work this weekend, and there's just something really fulfilling. You know, it feeds the soul to look at, like, okay, now the tub works properly, and now this room is clean, and now this is in order, and like the specific tasks are maybe not, you know, the most inspiring, joyful things in and of themselves, but when you look at it in terms of what does that allow your life to be and what's the end result, I mean, that is, you get to the end of it and you're just like, all right, you know, this was a good day well spent, and now I get to go do something, you know, that is more obviously enjoyable. You know, you go for a walk, you spend time with the people that you love, but that sort of purposeful work, when you're mindful about it, is wonderful, you know, as opposed to it's just either burdensome or you're like, why am I doing this? Is it that important? Like with cleaning your truck, you know, it's nice to have, you know, a truck where it just kind of glistens in the sun like that, but is that, you know, the best thing for that moment, you know? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, you know. If the kid's not there, then yeah, this is a really good thing that you can do that gives you that satisfaction. But stepping back and evaluating like that, and making the conscious effort to do so on a regular basis, it just profoundly changes what you do with your life. I know Mike barely watches TV, you know, and I think at least some part of that is I can't really picture Mike sitting down on the couch and being like, yes, this is the highest and best use of my time.
Totally.
You know?
For sure. For sure. Hey, Jeremiah, tell us about your podcast. Is this where we're going to get more information? If I want to hear more of everything that I just heard, is that a good place for it, or what's the podcast all about?
Yeah, that's so our podcast is called Destined to Be Podcast. We launched right before the beginning of the year. So it's our podcast is my wife and I's show, and we believe that everybody at least deserves to live a life unstuck. So we got practical takeaways on daily. So my wife tries to get me to dumb it down quite a bit because I get into epigenetics and I get all kinds of. So she wants me to bring it back to the average everyday Joe, because that's the majority of the masses. Those are the people that I want to really get to and say, hey, look, guys, like, where do you want to go in your life? So Destined to Be Podcast. You can find us on Spotify. I mean, pretty much anywhere where our podcasts are played, you can find us there. Connect with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever. I mean, you can pretty much find us anywhere.
How often are you guys releasing new episodes?
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Oh, wow. 2 a week. Okay. Awesome.
Twice a week, yeah.
Do you have any idea how many you've recorded so far?
I think number 44 dropped today.
Okay. Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So as soon as I get off this call, my wife's meeting at the office because we don't have our new office set up because we moved in our house with COVID and the studio set up. So
awesome.
Fantastic.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, guys. If anybody that listens to this wants to reach out to me or give me a buzz, give me a shout out.
Okay. And hopefully everyone can take a little piece of that to just kind of stay positive as, you know, we're all social distancing and the restrictions seem to be lightening up a little bit, and hopefully here by mid to end of summer, things might feel a little bit more normal. But, you know, everyone keep a positive mindset. I mean, I think some of the takeaways is, you know, get back into your routines, maybe set some goals and kind of, you know, reevaluate those goals, kind of set up your tasks for the day, you know, just be kind of aware of your being, of your mental health, all those things, and just awareness is super important.
Yeah, I know it's trite. I know it's played out, the whole new normal concept, but like really to not just put yourself in a holding pattern, but to say, hey, this is the way that it's going to be. What are the routines? What are the mantras? What are the things that I can do during this time, as opposed to just like, well, I'm just waiting until it goes back to the way that it was. Like accepting that, hey, some things are different and they're going to be different for quite a while. So how do you keep those positive routines, positive mindset? I mean, there's just so much value there. So again, Jeremiah, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
For sure.
My pleasure.